quarterback, maybe the most consequential position battle that this team will have in the spring, certainly in fall camp, as we try to determine what this team's ceiling is in 2024 in Sherrone Moore's first year. Big piece of the puzzle back now in Jack Tuttle, who gets a 7th year of eligibility, which is that's just kind of nuts, but circumstantially, that's the position that he finds himself in. And again, Jack Tuttle is a guy that I think, regardless, was going to be back with this program, either as a player or as a grad assistant. That's something that they had talked about at the end of last year. And, now he is going to be back. And I assume that he does factor into that quarterback battle, which as of now would be Jack Tuttle, Alex Orji, Jaden Denegal, Davis Warren, and outside shot that maybe Jaden Davis has a nice offseason here and makes a push for it in fall camp. But, what I wanted to hit on, first off, is let's talk the impact of it. I mean, Jack Tuttle is a guy you look at, he's played college football for 6 years, doesn't have a ton of starting experience. It came at Indiana, which, always comes with a bit of an asterisk because that's one of the lesser teams in the Big Ten. But Jack Tuttle in general, Clayton, what do you feel like he does for this room? Because I think at least he's a guy that will compete for the starting job. And at worst, it's a guy who is a veteran presence that's almost like a de facto coach on the field that has the, solid backup upside as well.
Well, first of all, I'm somewhat surprised that, one, he got this waiver granted, and two, that it came this quickly. I mean, it makes sense that the NCAA is, for all their faults, you would think that they would try to get this done before spring ball, and they did. So I give him credit for giving him an answer, because there are guys that, there was the North Carolina receiver went into last year waiting on a waiver, right, into the season, and then it got denied mid-year. So, at least that they have this answer now. But, because 2022 is the year that he was trying to get it for, and the injury happened in the back half of the season. It's supposed to happen in the first half. They make exceptions, and they made one here. I think it's pretty significant for Michigan. I mean, Jack Tuttle told me in late December when we were at the Rose Bowl Media Day that he was going to try to stay on as a coach either way, so he would have been around. But having him as a player in the role that he had last year, and from when you talk to people, the impact he had on J.J. McCarthy and the quarterback room in general, as kind of like you said, a coach, or but he was also the backup. He provided depth, and he has experience, and he has started 5 games in the Big Ten, so he brings that value as well. So I think to have him in the quarterback room with Kirk Campbell, who's now the offensive coordinator, is going to be big. He's got more responsibility now. But Jack Tuttle is going to compete for the starting job. And I would put him right near the top. Like he's at the top of the depth chart from last year among the guys that are returning. So he doesn't necessarily have the upside maybe that an Alex Orji would, or somebody else emerging in that group of guys that you mentioned. But you kind of know what he is. He has experience. He has started in the past. I thought he improved from when we saw him in the spring to, bits and pieces of when we saw him in the fall at Michigan, and will continue to. And he's 24, 25 years old at this point. I say that without researching it, and I should have before we came on here, but that's valuable too. Maybe he will, become something that he hadn't been before. Last time he started games, it was at Indiana a couple years ago, and then even more so the year before that. So that was a while ago at this point. It's going to be fall of 2024 coming up, and he could be improved from the different times that we saw him start throughout his career at Indiana. So I think it's big. It's nice for Michigan. I still think that you would try to get a transfer in the spring period, but it does not hurt one bit to have a guy like this back in the room, and, with eligibility where you could put him on the field.
Yeah. When you look at Jack Tuttle, this is a guy who leads a room that, when I talked to Kirk Campbell, while we were in Houston, he had said, everyone in that room, whether it be Tuttle, whether it's Alex Orji, Denegal, Davis Warren, Kirk Campbell had a direct, obviously as the quarterback's coach, was with those guys most of the time, and it could have been coach speak at the time, but I take Kirk Campbell's evaluation seriously and take his word for it when he says each one of those guys improved last year behind the scenes, which, you're not getting a ton of, if any, starting quarterback reps. So there's a lot of work you have to do on the scout team. There's a lot of work you have to do with the twos, but I think as this quarterback situation comes into focus, Clayton, when you look at what's coming back now, again, you're going to break in an entirely new offensive line, which will be different. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt there because there are going to be guys there that I think we've seen play before and play at a pretty high level. You know, Giovanni El Hadi being one of them. But then you look at the skill guys. Colston Loveland set to be back. The wide receivers. I think you can kind of talk yourself into being excited for Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan in bigger roles. And maybe that's a position that they look at in that spring window to augment the roster. But I think they've got some good pieces there. Obviously, at running back, we know what they have coming back with Donovan Edwards, Jordan Marshall, the guy that I think is going to get some time, and Cole Cabana and Benjamin Hall. And I think, I think it would be, if you're just a fan saying, oh, well, look at Jack Tuttle. He's started 5 games, has never looked impressive, and blah, 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 blah. But I think you could make a pretty easy argument that if he were to emerge as the starting guy, and I still don't buy that yet. I tend to believe, and I don't know why. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't know why I feel this way. It's just college football now. But I tend to lean to the idea that next year's starter is probably enrolled at classes somewhere else right now. But if it is Jack Tuttle or any of these guys, I think you could talk yourself into them piecing together a pretty good, pretty efficient offense that maybe doesn't quite have, the explosiveness that last year's did. But, I think they can find a way to coach what they have up and make it work throughout the regular season. But, obviously when we talk about college football playoff, we talk about potentially running back a national championship, which they are defending national champions until they lose their last game next year. That is something that Michigan can say. I do think that ultimately your best shot at running it back or making some noise again in the college football playoff probably comes with someone via the transfer portal, and we'll see who winds up being available. And quite frankly, I would never advocate for tampering or anything like that. But, if someone maybe isn't currently available that might be interested in being available, I would hope those overtures would take place behind the scenes too. So, because that's what's happening to their players. There are people trying to poach Michigan guys right now. So, and that's just the college football that we're in. So, your thoughts on the room as a whole. I mean, do you think their starter is on the roster right now?
I would lean that it is, just because of the unknown of what's going to be available, as you mentioned. Looking back at last year's cycle, there was only one top 15 transfer quarterback in the portal that ended up starting somewhere else. That entered the portal in the spring, that ended up starting somewhere else, and it was Peyton Thorne at Auburn, and he was pretty underwhelming. I know, going into the Alabama game, watching that film, you can look at a lot of things he did well in that game running the football, but and give him credit for that. But overall, he was pretty underwhelming. So if it's somebody of that caliber that is, going to be the guy you bring in the spring, who would only have a few months to prepare, it would be hard for me to predict that individual would come in. Now, it doesn't mean that just because last year there weren't many impact quarterbacks in the April period, that there's not going to be this year. There could be. And as you said, things happen behind the scenes. I mean, the fact that Keon Sabb became, apparently was on Alabama's short list within 2 hours of being in the portal makes you wonder about exactly what goes on behind the scenes. And I know there are back channels. I remember talking to somebody that was talking about Drake Nugent coming in. This is last summer. And before he entered the portal, months before, and this isn't tampering, this is Michigan scouting. He was, and I think part of it has to do with when your coach is going to get fired or, does get fired, like they did at Stanford with David Shaw. Like, they knew about Jack Tuttle and liked his game. And then once he entered the portal, it was like, okay, we like this guy. Let's reach out and try to get something done. He ends up being a Remington Award finalist at Michigan and a national champion this past year. So stuff like that happens for sure, where I think if a guy goes in, you got to know if you want him or not. And I think people, have a good idea of what's going to happen with some of these guys around the country. So, that's, something that I think could be a possibility. But I would lean that right now I would take the group of guys Michigan has over this unknown transfer, but that's me saying it really early without knowing who that transfer is.
And that's where I think spring ball is critical. I mean, they're going to have at least, let's just say conservatively, 3 guys that are probably going to get starting reps. maybe 4. It's going to be a true battle. And I think the fact that, again, a lot of people are speculating that this spring window could be chaos for everyone, not just the guys that maybe were looking to transfer from Michigan during the coaching change, but couldn't because of classes. Obviously, that, if a guy wants to leave, obviously saw with Keon Saab, you can jump into the portal regardless. But I think this whole situation has bought you time. And I think being able to have a spring ball where you go through 5-6 weeks of truly knowing what you have, and maybe not completely knowing what you have, but at least getting an idea of what that pecking order looks like. I think that's huge for them. And that's where, you talk about knowing those guys that might enter the portal and having them scouted. I think that's where operationally, having a guy like Sean McGee now as your GM, you become a little better prepared to scout guys, to have an idea of who you might want should they come available. So it's going to be interesting. I'm with you. I would still, if you're asking me transfer or the field in terms of the guys that they already have, I'm probably taking the field. But we'll see what happens. There's a lot to sort out. I think that, fundamentally, I think the offense is pretty much going to stay the same. But there are going to be some tweaks, and they're going to be willing to tweak to the skill set of the guy that ultimately wins the gig. But, if you come out of spring ball and feel pretty good about what you have, I could see them not adding anyone. But again,
you just got to know. Yeah, we just got to see who's out there. I mean, because I could see that too. But if there's someone they like, they should go after them. And it's a great opportunity if you're somebody in the portal to come in, play with this defense. The guys that you do have around you. I do have a prediction for the spring game. I already can't wait for our spring game draft. But I think with the wide receiving core being kind of inexperienced, a little bit thin right now, and the team split up, I have a prediction that people are going to be panicking about the quarterback play after the spring game. It's kind of hard to look good with those split up rosters. You don't get the best protection because you have the split offensive line as well, unless they go with a different format, right? Because we don't know what Sherrone Moore spring games look like. So I'm saying that as if they go with what they've done the last couple of years, there will be panic because, nobody's getting open and they can't protect and they're, whatever. So that's just a prediction. But I'm excited to do our mock draft for the spring game already. It'll be a couple months, right?
Yeah, 2 months from tomorrow. So got to start putting that board together, man. I don't know who I'd take first right now. But it'll be interesting for sure. Any other thoughts on these quarterbacks? Again, I think I know there's been a lot of freaking out because there has been so much change over the last 4 or 5 weeks, but I can still talk to myself into this team being pretty darn good. Again, depending on who's available, who stays, who emerges, all of that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, like you have, the Jack Tuttle, his, waiver getting granted, I don't think should be completely overlooked because at the very least, this guy could be solid, not turn the ball over, lean on a great defense. And I think some of the other guys in that room could do that as well. And if you want to say, okay, what's your weakest spots on the roster? It might be wide receiver right now. I know you have Colston Loveland at tight end. You can throw the ball to Donovan Edwards, Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris. They're promising. Fred Morris promising. So is Carmelo English, guys like that. But you don't have a ton of experience there. Well, maybe Alex Orji is a guy who, okay, well, let's go with the run heavy formation or, option with Alex Orji at quarterback. So that's an option. If you have a great defense, you at least have something to hang your hat on and you can be pretty good, if not really good. So yeah, there's still a lot of hope for the season, obviously. And we'll see what they do in the transfer portal because rosters do not look the same February 19th as they do, August 31st when they kick off against Fresno State. I already can't wait. But yeah, so it's still a long way to go, but certainly a lot of promise.
And maybe don't rule out, let's just say that it's Tuttle and Orji at the top. Maybe you have a 2 QB system.
I could see it. Maybe they redefine what a starting quarterback looks like, as Jim Harbaugh said they might do before 2019, before he just played Shea Patterson the whole year, which, by the way, was the right call. But.
Yeah. Gosh, shout out to Dan Villari, who's now a tight end anyways, right?
And the kick returner, Alex Orji, too.
Oh, my gosh. I was waiting for that to revolutionize the kick return game. And maybe that's still in the cards for this year. I don't know. But we'll see what happens.